No one touched her heart until the human walked in and said, "I want to meet you." The silent dot-earth crystal spires of Zephyr's capital pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the cold perfection that the Vorthic civilization prized above all else. Within the highest tower, Kellen Vex stood at the observation deck, her silver eyes scanning the geometric cityscape below. To any observer, she appeared as composed as the marble statues lining the corridors, but appearances on Vorthic meant everything, and truth meant nothing. Her father, High Diplomat Zorian Vex, materialized beside her with the characteristic shimmer of teleportation that marked the elite class. His mental voice pressed against her consciousness like ice water. "The Earth delegation arrives within the solar cycle. You will observe from the archives section." Silently, Kellen's fingers tightened imperceptibly against the crystal rail. 23 rotations of age, and still she was relegated to the shadows like a malformed child. The irony wasn't lost on her in a society that valued mental connection above all else. She was the one who felt too much, too deeply. Her emotional resonance disrupted their carefully calibrated telepathic networks, marking her as defective. In their eyes, "Understood, Father," she projected back, keeping her mental voice as neutral as processed air. Zorian's pale features remained expressionless, but she caught the edge of his disgust before he shielded his thoughts. "Remember, daughter, the humans are primitive. Their emotional volatility is infectious. Do not contaminate yourself with their weakness." After he departed, Kellen allowed herself one moment of rebellion, a single tear that froze before it could fall in the chamber's regulated atmosphere. She thought of her younger years when her empathic abilities first manifested. How the other young Vorthok would recoil from her presence. They called her the broken one, behind mental barriers they thought she couldn't penetrate. But she felt everything: their fear, their revulsion, their pity. The archives section of the diplomatic hall was perfect for someone meant to be invisible. Rows of crystalline data cores hummed with the recorded knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. And here, surrounded by the voices of the past, Kellen found the only peace her world offered. She'd spent countless cycles here, learning about other species, other ways of thinking and feeling. The humans fascinated her most, their chaotic emotional spectrum, their physical expressions of joy and sorrow, their inexplicable need to touch and be touched, everything the Vorthok had evolved beyond. Or so they claimed. When the Earth delegation's transport began its descent, Kellen positioned herself behind the largest data core, its blue glow casting shadows that would hide her completely. The main hall filled with her people, tall, pale, their movements coordinated with mathematical precision. High Chancellor Nexus took his position at the center, his mental commands rippling outward like stones in still water. The humans entered with a rush of everything. Kellen gasped despite herself. Their emotions hit her empathic senses like a symphony after a lifetime of silence. Joy, nervousness, curiosity, determination, a beautiful cacophony that made her heart race in ways she'd forgotten were possible. She counted 12 humans there, faces wonderfully imperfect, their clothes practical rather than ceremonial. They moved with individual purpose rather than collective harmony. And Kellen found herself leaning forward, desperate to understand how they maintained their sanity in such emotional chaos. Then she saw him. He was younger than the others, with dark hair that refused to follow any logical pattern and eyes the color of Earth's ancient oceans. While his companions focused on the formal proceedings, his gaze wandered, taking in the architecture, the technology, the faces of her people with genuine curiosity rather than the clinical assessment she expected. When his eyes swept past her hiding place, Kellen held her breath for just a moment. She imagined what it would be like if someone looked at her with that same open interest, without the immediate judgment that had followed her since childhood. The formal greetings began, mental voices weaving together in the traditional patterns of diplomatic exchange. But Kellen barely noticed. She was watching the young human, wondering what thoughts lived behind those expressive features, what it might feel like to know someone who embraced emotion instead of hiding from it. She had no way of knowing that in 3 days, her entire world would change forever. "I want to meet you." The diplomatic session stretched across days like a carefully choreographed dance, each movement precise and meaningful. From her concealed position in the archives, Kellen observed the growing tension between the two species. The humans grew visibly frustrated with the Vorthic's cold formality, while her people struggled to comprehend the aliens' emotional expressions. Eli Novak, she'd learned his name from the whispered conversations, served as the delegation's xenolinguist and cultural liaison. Unlike the others who wore their confusion openly, he seemed genuinely intrigued by the challenge of bridging to completely different ways of being. On the third day, during a particularly strained session about trade agreements, Chancellor Nexus made an error that sent ripples of embarrassment through the Vorthic collective consciousness. Kellen felt it like a physical blow: the shame, the anger, the desperate attempt to maintain face. Her empathic abilities flared involuntarily as she pressed her hands against her temples, trying to contain the overflow. A crystal data core near her hiding spot flickered and went dark. Eli noticed immediately. His head turned toward the archives section, and Kellen froze as his ocean blue eyes found hers across the vast hall. She should have looked away, should have melted deeper into the shadows, but something in his expression held her captive. There was no judgment there, no revulsion, only curiosity and something that looked almost like recognition. The session continued, but Kellen felt his attention return to her hiding place several more times. Each glance sent unfamiliar warmth through her chest, a sensation she'd only read about in the human cultural files. When the formal proceedings ended for the day, Kellen expected the usual dismissal routine. The humans would be escorted to their quarters, her people would disperse to process the day's information, and she would remain hidden until summoned. Instead, she watched in growing alarm as Eli separated from his group. He walked directly toward the archives section. Panic flooded her system. This was forbidden. Humans weren't allowed unsupervised access to Vorthic knowledge stores, and she certainly wasn't permitted contact with alien dignitaries. She should activate an emergency beacon, alert the guards, disappear through the maintenance passages that honeycombed the tower. Instead, she stood frozen as he approached her data core. "Hello," he said softly, his voice carrying none of the harsh consonants that made Vorthic's speech sound like breaking glass. "I'm sorry if I'm intruding, but I noticed you during the sessions. You seemed different from the others." Kellen's throat closed. No one had spoken directly to her, not at her, not about her, but to her in more cycles than she could count. The words felt like physical touch, gentle and warm against her emotional barriers. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. She spoke in his language, the syllables feeling strange but wonderful on her tongue. "Maybe," he agreed, settling cross-legged on the floor with casual ease that would have scandalized her people. "But I'm glad you are. I'm Eli, by the way, Eli Novak." "I know," she said, then flushed at how that sounded. "I mean, I've been observing the sessions, for archives purposes." He smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "Right? And what's your name? Unless that's classified information." The question hit her like a shock wave. When was the last time someone had asked her name? Really asked, wanting to know her as an individual rather than simply identifying her as Zorian's defective. "Daughter Kellen," she said, tasting her own name as if she'd never spoken it before. "Kellen." He repeated it carefully, getting the pronunciation almost perfect on the first try. "That means seeker of truth in your language, doesn't it?" She stared at him. "How did you?" "I study languages, remember, but more than that. I study the cultures behind them, and I've been watching your people, trying to understand how you communicate, how you connect." He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "But you're different. You feel things they don't you?" The accuracy of his observation stole her breath. That's why I'm broken," she whispered. "Broken?" His eyebrows drew together. In confusion. "You mean because you have emotions? Because I have too many emotions? Because I disrupt the collective harmony? Because I'm contaminated by primitive responses that my people evolved beyond eons ago?" Eli was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but felt like sunlight instead. "On Earth," he said finally, "we have a saying, the heart that feels deeply is never broken, just brave enough to stay open in a world that often isn't." Tears, actual, physical tears, began to fall down Kellen's cheeks. She'd never heard anything so beautiful, so validating of everything she'd been told was wrong with her. "I want to meet you," Eli said suddenly, extending his hand palm up in what she recognized as a human gesture of offering. "Not observe you, not study you, not analyze you for diplomatic purposes. I want to meet you, the real you." The moment their fingers touched, the universe exploded into light. The forbidden bond connection hit them simultaneously, a cascade of sensation, emotion, and consciousness that neither species had experienced in recorded history. Kellen gasped as Ellie's thoughts and feelings rushed through her mind like a flood. Not the controlled mental touch of Vorthic telepathy, but something wild and beautiful and utterly overwhelming. Through his consciousness, she felt his wonder at her world's crystal beauty, his frustration with the diplomatic barriers, his genuine fascination with different ways of thinking. But beneath it all, she sensed something that made her heart skip, loneliness that matched her own. The isolation of someone who spent his life building bridges between worlds. While standing alone in the middle, Ellie's experience was equally intense. The careful walls he'd built around his emotions crumbled under the onslaught of Kellen's deep, suppressed feelings, years of hidden pain, desperate longing for connection, and the incredible strength it took to survive in a world that saw her. Gifts as flaws, all of it poured into him with crystalline clarity. But there was more. Somehow, impossibly, their minds had synchronized. He could feel what she felt, think her thoughts, experience her memories as if they were his own. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely forbidden. "What's happening to us?" Eli whispered, his voice shaking. Kellen pulled her hand back, but the connection didn't break. If anything, it strengthened, settling into something that felt as natural as breathing. Ancient knowledge surfaced in her mind, fragments of old stories, dismissed legends that she'd only half believed. The resonance bond, she breathed. "But that's impossible. It's just mythology." "What is it?" he asked, though part of him already knew through their shared consciousness. "A connection between compatible souls that transcends species barriers." It was supposed to be the ultimate form of communication, of understanding. But the last recorded case was over 800 cycles ago, and never between different species. The implications crashed over them both. In Vorthic society, unsanctioned mental bonds were considered dangerous aberrations. Between a defective daughter and an alien primitive, it would be seen as contamination of the worst kind. "We have to hide this," Kellen said. Even as part of her rejoiced at finally having someone who truly understood her. "Can we? I can feel your emotions as clearly as my own. Your people are telepathic, won't they notice? Most telepathy among my people is surface level, formal communication. This is deeper, more private, but if they probe specifically." She shuddered at the thought of her father discovering the bond. Over the following days, they met in secret in forgotten maintenance corridors, abandoned research chambers, anywhere they might have a few precious moments together. Each encounter deepened their connection and their understanding of each other. Through Ellie's memories, Kellen experienced Earth, the chaotic beauty of thunderstorms, the warmth of unconditional family love, the joy of discovery that drove his academic pursuits. She felt his childhood pain of being too sensitive, too curious, too different from his peers, and recognized a kindred spirit across the void of space. Eli, in turn, experienced Vorthic culture through her eyes. He felt the suffocating pressure of their emotional suppression. The way their society's pursuit of perfect logic had created a kind of spiritual starvation. He understood why she was considered broken. She was the only one of her people who had retained the capacity for deep feeling that they'd bred out of themselves. "You're not defective," he told her during one of their clandestine meetings. "You're what your people used to be before they forgot how to feel." "That's heresy," she replied, but her heart sang at his words. "Maybe, but I've studied a lot of civilizations, and the ones that thrive are the ones that balance logic with emotion, individual thought with collective wisdom. Your people have achieved incredible things, but they've lost something essential." Their conversations ranged from philosophy to poetry, from quantum mechanics to the simple pleasure of shared laughter. Kellen bloomed under his attention, her natural intelligence and deep emotional wisdom finally having an outlet. Eli found in her a mind that could match his own curiosity, while offering perspectives he'd never imagined. but they both knew their time was limited. The diplomatic mission would end soon, and Eli would return to Earth. The thought of separation felt like contemplating the amputation of a limb technically survivable, but devastating beyond measure. It was during their final planned meeting that disaster struck. High Diplomat Zorian burst into the chamber where they sat talking. His pale face twisted with fury and disgust. "Contamination," he hissed, his mental voice sharp enough to cut. "I sense the disturbance in your neural patterns, daughter. To think you would pollute yourself with this creature." Eli stepped protectively in front of Kellen, though he knew it was useless. "Sir, I can explain." Silence. "Primitive. You have corrupted my daughter with your emotional instability. The bond between you will be severed, and you will be confined until your departure." "No," Kellen said, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Father, you don't understand. This connection isn't corruption, it's evolution. It's what we lost when we decided feeling was weakness." Zorian's mental laugh was like acid. "You speak of evolution while demonstrating the very regression I've spent decades trying to prevent." Guards, as Vorthic security forces surrounded them, Kellen made a choice that would change everything. She reached for Ellie's hand, letting their bond flare bright enough for every telepath in the building to sense. "Feel what I feel." She projected to all of them. "See what love actually looks like." The conspiracy unveiled psychic resonance of Kellen's fully open bond sent shockwaves through the diplomatic compound. Every Vorthic telepath within range staggered under the sudden assault of pure, unfiltered emotion. Some cried out in confusion. Others simply stood frozen as sensations they'd long forgotten. Joy, compassion, deep affection flooded their carefully regulated consciousness. In the chaos, Eli grabbed Kellen's hand and pulled her toward the emergency exits. Their shared awareness let them move as one entity, anticipating each other's actions with perfect synchronization. Behind them, Zorian's furious mental commands cut through the confusion like ice shards. "Seal the compound. Find them." They ran through corridors Kellen knew from childhood, their bond allowing Eli to navigate the alien architecture as if he'd lived there all his life. But as they reached the transport bays, armed guards blocked their path. "There's nowhere to go," Kellen whispered, despair creeping into her voice. "Even if we reach the human delegation, they can't protect us from Vorthic law." Eli squeezed her hand, his determination flowing through their link. "Then we need allies, people who understand what we've discovered. Who would believe us? Who would risk?" A new voice interrupted them. "I would." They spun to find Chancellor Nexus emerging from the shadows, his usually composed features etched with something that looked like wonder. Behind him stood three other Vorthic holder individuals Kellen recognized as members of the ruling council. "Chancellor," Zorian's voice echoed from the corridor behind them. "Thank the collective. Contain these two immediately." But Nexus didn't move to capture them. Instead, he studied Kellen and Eli with intense curiosity. "High Diplomat Zorian, your daughter has just demonstrated something that our scientists claimed was impossible. She has formed a cross-species empathic bond, a dangerous aberration that must be corrected." Zorian replied, his guards flanking him. "Chancellor, surely you see the threat this poses to our social order." "Do I?" Nexus mused. "Or do I see an opportunity to understand something we thought we'd lost forever?" He turned to Kellen. "Child, show me again. Let me feel what you've discovered." Kellen looked at Eli, uncertainty flickering through their bond. This could be a trap, a way to study their connection before destroying it. But something in the Chancellor's expression reminded her of her younger self, hungry for knowledge, desperate to understand the universe's deeper mysteries. She opened her mind. The bond's energy flowed outward again, but this time she controlled it, sharing not just the raw emotion, but the profound understanding that came with it. Through her connection with Eli, the Vorthic officials experienced human perspective, the way emotions enhanced rather than hindered cognitive function, how empathy created stronger rather than weaker societies. One of the council members gasped audibly, "The clarity. I can see their civilization from the inside. Their chaos isn't weakness, it's adaptability." "Fascinating," another murmured. "Their emotional volatility actually increases their problem-solving capacity in certain situations." Chancellor Nexus nodded slowly. This changes everything we thought we knew about evolutionary development. He fixed Zorian with a stern look. High Diplomat, I believe your personal feelings about your daughter may be clouding your judgment about the scientific significance of this discovery. Zorian's mental voice cracked like a whip. Personal feelings, Chancellor. I am protecting our species from contamination. This bond could spread. It could destabilize everything we've built. Or, said a new voice from the entrance, it could save both our worlds. Everyone turned as Dr. Heston Clark, the leader of the Earth delegation, strode into the transport bay. His weathered face was grim with knowledge. That made Kellen's blood run cold. I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Clark continued, but we've just received urgent communications from both Earth and your outer colonies. The Devourers have been spotted at the edge of this system. The name sent ice through every Vorthic present. The Devourers, a parasitic species that consumed the life force of entire worlds, had been dormant for decades. Their return meant extinction for any civilization in their path. How long do we have? Chancellor Nexus asked. Our analysts estimate 6 days before they reach inhabited worlds. But that's not the worst news. Dr. Clark's expression grew even more grave. Our preliminary scans suggest they've evolved. They're no longer just consuming biological life force, they're feeding on consciousness itself. Pure logic or pure emotion isn't enough to resist them anymore. What are you saying? Zorian demanded. Eli stepped forward, understanding flooding through him via his bond with Kellen. You need both. Logical strategy combined with emotional resilience. Neither of our species alone has what it takes to survive this. But together, Kellen whispered, the implications staggering her. Chancellor Nexus looked between them, comprehension dawning in his pale eyes. The bond. It's not just personal connection, it's a new form of hybrid consciousness, one that combines the strengths of both species. This is speculation, Zorian protested. We cannot base our species' survival on the fantasies of a defective child and her alien contaminator. Then we test it, Dr. Clark said simply. We have 6 days to prepare a defense that's never been tried before. The alternative is watching both our civilizations die. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the compound. Emergency lights bathed the transport bay in pulsing red. As automated voices announced in multiple languages, long-range sensors detect Devourer scout ships entering the outer system. All defensive protocols are now active. Chancellor Nexus straightened, and for the first time since Kellen had known him, she sensed genuine emotion behind his mental shield's fear, determination, and something that might have been hope. High Diplomat Zorian, I'm invoking emergency protocols. Your daughter and the human Eli Novak are now under my direct protection. We're going to need their bond if we're going to survive. What's coming? The war for 2 worlds was about to begin, and it would be fought not with weapons, but with the power of connection itself. Love Conqueror's alt-war room beneath the Capitol spire hummed with desperate activity. As Vorthic and human minds worked together for the first time in history, holographic displays showed the approaching Devour fleet, massive, organic-looking ships that seemed to absorb light itself. Intelligence reports painted a terrifying picture, entire systems stripped of all consciousness, leaving behind empty husks floating in the void. Kellen stood at the center of it all, her hand clasped in Ellie's as their bond served as a living bridge between 2 species. Through their connection, human creativity flowed to Vorthic strategists while alien logic enhanced human tactical thinking. The result was revolutionary battle plans that neither species could have conceived alone. The scout reports are coming in, Dr. Clark announced, his face pale as he read the data streams. They've confirmed our worst fears. These Devourers have evolved beyond anything in our records. They're not just consuming biological life force anymore. They're harvesting pure consciousness itself. Chancellor Nexus studied the tactical displays with newfound emotional intensity that would have been impossible weeks ago. Exposure to the bond between Kellen and Eli had awakened something in many of the Vorthic. Not full emotional capacity, but at least an understanding of its value. Traditional defenses are useless, he stated. Our logic-based shields. They're emotion-driven weapons. Nothing we have can stop them individually. But together, Eli asked, hope threading through his mental voice. Together, we might have a chance, Chancellor Nexus replied, but it requires something unprecedented. We need to create a planet-wide version of your Banda hybrid consciousness network that combines both species' strengths. Zorian, who had remained silent since being overruled, finally spoke. The risks are incalculable. Such a network could destabilize both our societies permanently. Father, Kellen said, her voice gentle but firm. Look around you. Our societies are already changing. The question isn't whether we can go back to the way things were, it's whether we choose to move forward together or die separately. Through their bond, she felt Ellie's pride in her courage, and it gave her strength to continue. I know you think I'm broken, contaminated, wrong. But what if I'm not the mutation? What if I'm the evolution our people have been waiting for? The room fell silent except for the soft hum of alien technology. Then, slowly, other voices began to speak. I've felt it, said one of the Vorthic council members. When their bond opened, for just a moment, I remembered what it was like to truly care about something beyond pure logic. Same here, added a human engineer, but I also experienced their clarity of thought. It was like my mind became a precision instrument. More testimonies followed. Vorthic who had touched the edge of genuine emotion. Humans who had tasted the power of unfettered logic. All of them describing a completeness they'd never known was missing. The network is theoretically possible, Chancellor Nexus concluded, but it requires willing participants. We cannot force this bond, it must be chosen freely. And we need anchor points, Eli added, understanding flooding through him. Kellen, and I can serve as the template, but we'll need other bonded pairs to stabilize the network across both populations. Other pairs, Zorian demanded. You're talking about encouraging more of these aberrations? No, Kellen replied, her mental voice carrying a new authority that surprised everyone, including herself. We're talking about choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, the future over the past. As if responding to her words, alarms suddenly shrieked through the war room. The main display flickered to show new sensor readings. The Devour main fleet had arrived early. There, dark ships blotting out the stars. They're here, Dr. Clark whispered. 3 days ahead of schedule. Then we choose now. Chancellor Nexus declared. All volunteers for the Consciousness Network, step forward. For a moment, nobody moved. The weight of the decision pressed down on them all to join their minds with an alien species, to risk everything they'd ever known for the possibility of something greater. Then, slowly, Vorthic and humans began stepping forward. Not everyone. Fear and prejudice still held many back, but enough. Scientists and diplomats, engineers and philosophers, soldiers and healers. They came forward not as separate species, but as conscious beings choosing hope over despair. The network formed gradually, carefully, with Kellen and Eli at its heart. Each new connection sent ripples of hybrid consciousness outward, creating something that had never existed before, a truly unified intelligence. That was neither purely logical nor purely emotional, but something entirely new. As the Devourer ships began their assault on the planet's outer defenses, the network responded with strategies and innovations that surprised everyone. Vorthic crystal technology enhanced by human intuition, Earth weapons guided by alien precision. Most importantly, a collective will to survive that drew strength from both species' greatest assets. The battle raged for hours that felt like days. The Devourers, encountering a form of consciousness they couldn't understand or consume, faltered in their attack. Their weapons, designed to drain pure logic or pure emotion, found no purchase against the hybrid network. Finally, as the enemy fleet began to retreat, Chancellor Nexus addressed both species through the network. We have won more than a battle today. We have discovered what we were meant to become, not separate civilizations struggling alone, but partners in consciousness itself. In the aftermath, as the immediate danger passed, many chose to maintain their connections to the network. Others, overwhelmed by the intensity, withdrew but carried with them a new understanding of what was possible. Kellen and Eli, their bond now the foundation of something vast and beautiful, stood together watching the sunrise over the crystal spires. For the first time in her life, Kellen felt truly at home in her own world. So what happens now, Eli asked, his thoughts warm with contentment and infinite possibility. Now, she replied, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had discovered her true purpose. We learn to love across the stars. We teach others that connection isn't contamination, it's evolution. And we prove that the heart that feels deeply isn't broken at all. Their kiss sealed not just their own future, but the future of two species learning, together, what it truly meant to be alive in the universe. The girl who had been called broken had become the bridge to wholeness. And love, messy, chaotic, wonderful love, had indeed conquered all.